Well, hello and welcome to Polity Matters. My name is Ben Ratliff, and I'm joined by my friend and yours, Mr. Jared Nelson. And I waited this long to say it. I'm going to say it with great exuberance. General Assembly is over, and we are glad. And it was good to see everybody, but I'm glad to be on this side of it. I don't know how you're feeling about it, Jared, but we're going to talk about it. I will say from the top, it was really good to see you and Scott and the other guys that we, kind of hang out with. And there was a picture taken of the three of us, and somebody referenced the fact that it looked like you taking your children to General Assembly.
The funny thing...
have you ever taken your children to General Assembly?
I have not. Like, I always hear the stories about Harry Reeder and his kids and how they always had fun there. But I can just imagine my kids running around just, being told by the moderator to be quiet because they're making too much noise. So...
Well, we'll be happy to be your children at General Assembly for forever if you want to, so that we can do that for you. Y'all can tell from my voice, I'm a little under the weather. I brought back a lot of swag from GA, but I also brought back a little sickness, and so that's been kind of fun the last few days. Now my family has it, and Scott, we don't know where Scott is. Maybe we do. But he's just gone, and it took me this long to remember to say something about him, and I apologize. But he's away, recovering from General Assembly or something.
He'll be back.
Boy, I'm still foggy.
He'll be back,
man.
Our special episode next time.
Scott will be back, man. Yeah, so we're gonna just do sort of a brief recap. We wanted to get something on the record as quick as we could after GA, and so while it's still fresh in our minds. But Jared's right. We're gonna have Scott come in. He served on overtures this year, and so there are a lot of BCO amendments going to the presbyteries after this assembly, and we want Scott to kind of walk us through and give us a sense of each of those. And so we'll have a whole episode devoted to BCO amendments that were passed. Or that were started last week. So stay tuned for that. We'll get that out there for you guys, and we may have something else we're working on. We're trying to get a guest or two involved in some GA recap for you, maybe in a couple more weeks. But with all that said, we're just going to work through. The list that we came up with is not a number. It's not anything special. It is just a list that says things about PCA General Assembly. So Jared and I have some stuff we're just going to run through and talk about things that happened in no particular order. Don't give any attention to these in a special way if they come earlier or later in the list. And some of them are meaningless in and of themselves. And yeah. And then we're going to have, we'll mention our special thing towards the end, Jared, so that we'll let you kind of introduce your thing later. I'm not to edit a lot of this, man. Okay. So things about PCA General Assembly from 2025 at the 52nd General Assembly in Chattanooga. The first one, I guess, maybe was just kind of elephant in the room. There was a bunch of stuff going on about stated clerk this year, and it sort of just was done right at the beginning. I served on the AC Committee of Commissioners, and what they did on the floor of the assembly is kind of what Danny McDaniel did in our COC meeting. He just told us what had happened. Brian Chappell retired. I forget what word in particular we were using. And the AC has hired John Bice to be the interim stated clerk. And that's what's going on. So next year, they'll bring a recommendation to the floor through the COC for a new stated clerk, presumably. I'm curious how that kind of came at you. We served on the same committee of commissioners, but what impressions did you have?
I had been put on AC COC back in January and then didn't realize it was going to be on Monday. Yeah. So in April, I was actually trying to give it away and nobody wanted it. They just thought it would be boring. And then in May, it seemed like it was going to be really exciting. But then actually when we had it, it wasn't as contentious. There was nobody trying to do like a floor nominee or something like that. It was just the announcement, and we got to see Bice at work a little bit in our ACCOC, which was nice. I think he's been well received. That was kind of the surprising. I think because they chose Bice as the interim, everybody was happy. I mean, people in every camp of the PCA, I think, respect him. So even when they don't agree with him, I remember one time in one of the recommendations, I voted opposite what he told us they were wanting. I was like, I feel bad doing it because I like you so much. But yeah, so that was kind of the surprising thing, was how calm the topic of the stated clerk was. You had Brian tell us that he was retiring and kind of have a final apology for the circumstances of that. But again, that was also, I think, well received and didn't really result in anything contentious.
Well, the other thing we've got on our list here is, and you're going to have to speak to this, I think, because I was trying to pay attention for it, but it happened so quickly that I totally missed it. Last year's General Assembly, we had asked CDM to do something related to Jesus Calling and to report back. And I think that Steve Estock had it in his just report on the floor, but it totally passed me by. You know, Phil guys.
Yeah, last year it was a big deal that we were asking MTW and CDM to tell us about their relationship with Jesus Calling. Both of those committees came back and told us their interactions with it. In fact, CDM pointed out that they don't sell it. They don't really recommend it. And if you have a question about it pastorally, go ask your pastor, which I thought was a great response to it. And so everybody was like, okay. That was probably one of the other surprising things. It was the thing that didn't happen was we got reports back from our committees and everybody seemed to be satisfied with their answers on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's not such a bad thing for something that was sort of, you know, seemed like such a big deal, kind of has come to a nice, easy conclusion. Talk to your pastor. Never bad advice. A big deal for us last week was that GA was the first time we got to see Per Almquist's commentary on the BCO in print, in full. All the constitutional portions of the BCO commented on in a nice paperback copy from CDM and the AC, and they sold out entirely. I think I talked to the guy at one point. They had 90 copies that they brought, and they were gone. I think by like Wednesday afternoon, I was seeing people say they were sold out of them. So we want to give an opportunity, though, to our listeners. So I've got a copy of it. It's called Our Bond of Union. It's a commentary on the BCO of the PCA by Per Almquist. We got Per to sign a copy for us, and we're going to give it away. And actually, the one that I have in front of me is not the signed copy. I must have left it at home, where it's being safely kept behind many, many fireproof doors, just to preserve its value and worth for the recipient. So, if you want a free copy of Per's commentary, which is now currently sold out, a signed copy, email us with your how Polity Matters has been most helpful to you over the last year or two. Same thing if you want to do it over a tweet or a Facebook post, do that. How Polity Matters has been most helpful for you. We'll post these instructions in our show notes and on socials, and maybe we'll give you all 2, 3, 4 weeks to kind of line all this up, and we'll let you know what's going on. And then come end of July, I'll send a copy out. We'll count your response as an entry, but then we'll also kind of weigh them based on your responses, and it'll give us something to share with everybody. So How Polity Matters has best helped you in the past, and that'll give you a chance to win a copy of Per's new book, Our Bond of Union.
And he is interested in coming on to talk about it at some point, so be looking forward to that.
Yes. My only goal at GA, well, I had several only goals that were really not connected to the assembly at all, but one of them was to make Per laugh. And I succeeded at least once, maybe twice, but that's a win for me. I mean, really, we could have done everything else in the opposite way that I wanted, and I would have been happy having made Per laugh.
I think it's a good book. I've been reviewing it. I have Ramsey and Smith and Almquist all next to each other now, and I think it's good to have all three. Mm-hmm. You can have the historical for Ramsey. I think Smith gets into the weeds sometimes, but then Almquist is much more of a here's just a everybody access it, understandable explanation. So all of them have their functions, and it's just nice to have another resource.
Yeah. Well, I just talked way too much about how to enter this little contest we're doing. Why don't you talk about study committees? We seem to have gotten over our fatigue, I think was the line that you gave me at some point. And
yes,
I totally agree.
I guess we can stop talking about study committee fatigue. We approved our first one since, was it 2018 or 19 was the last time that we approved one with the DASA and the sexuality study committees. And we actually had to figure out which ones we were going to choose because there was a lot of interest in 3 of them. One was the AI study committee to study the pastoral implications of AI. That was delayed until next year because we already have 2. The other 2 that we chose were, I think, surprising almost on both accounts. Number one, the Christian nationalism study committee that seemed to have a groundswell of support as people have been dealing with pastoral issues of people asking questions a lot. I don't know if the study committee will be for the layperson or just for the pastor to figure out how to answer some of those questions. And then the other one was, it's not really a study committee, but it counts in the ad interim committees that you can have, which is the directory for public worship, which we'd like to thank GA for giving us another season of content here at Polity Matters. That's what I was excited to see. So we could go through the directory as it is, and then as it gets changed, we'll have another season available to us. Yeah, so we went from having no study committees that we approved for like 5 or 6 years to 2.
I mean, fun times. I don't know if you'd say that it was contentious or dramatic or not, but nominating committee this year was especially interesting. I'll refer folks back to our NomCom deep dive from 2024 in our episodes. I'll find a link and stick it in the show notes. But nominating committee is an important committee at the General Assembly, and a lot of the times you do see some floor nominees. This year, do you recall? I think there were 22 floor nominees.
A total of 37 that were submitted, 35 that were valid, but some of them were running for vacant slots. So you'd have 2 floor nominees running against each other. So gotcha. I think we had a total of 30 elections. And of those, I think you had like 9 that the floor nominee won and like 20 or 21 that the committee did. And the committee makes something like 64, 65 different nominations for different committees, which means in the end, about 55 out of 64 or something like that were the nominating committee's nominee. Some people were surprised, or maybe if they were on nominating committee, upset that there were so many floor nominees, although having been in the PCA for longer, there used to be tons of floor nominees. It feels like we went back to a norm of having quite a few floor nominees. We just hadn't had any for a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, well, what is normally characterized as the shortest but very important part of the GA was a little longer than we're used to in recent years. Our friend Matt Adams chaired that committee, and he did good. He just stood up there and read names.
He is literate.
Excellent.
That's what is required. I can say that as the former chairman of the nominating committee. That's your qualification for being chairman is you're literate. At least when you get to the GA. I mean, running the committee, you have to know some Robert's rules. But
there were a few things that happened this year, and we don't want to get too much in the weeds of all this because a lot of it is rather contentious at this point. But there was a couple different things I was going to point out. That there was a lot of debate about minutes related to AC. And then there was a lot of debate about budgets related to AC and to M&A, and all of that kind of ran together. It was just a lot of weedy, long discussion. I don't know how much you want to say about all that. I think I would pivot to say that Kevin DeYoung was a great moderator overall, and it especially showed in some of those discussions that got deep down into the unknowns of Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure.
Yeah, I was quite amused when, first of all, the nerd in me loved seeing Per Almquist versus Stephen O'Neill debate whether or not the ACCOC should cite the AC committee for the things that they included, which I think Stephen O'Neill pointed out at one point. Nobody gets fired over this. Nothing happens. We just say, hey, Can you include this in your minutes next time? And it was a 10-minute debate between the two of them. And then I went to the floor, and I loved when Kevin DeYoung was basically like, okay, anybody wants to come to the mics, but remember, we're debating the keeping of minutes. So,
oh man. Yeah. I mean, on that note, we should say, Kevin was a great moderator. I was I enjoyed him being up there moderating, and I think he did a good job keeping us in order. And
he did the one thing that a moderator really needs to do with votes was to say, if you're going to vote yes, this is what it means, and if you want to vote no, this is what it means. And I think he did some of the best of that. I mean, he's up there with Fred Greco and Howie Donahoe in terms of just how clear he was, which I don't know if people expected that. You think of him as a theologian, not as a polity guy, and he knew his polity. He knew his Robert's rules.
Yeah. My favorite part about Kevin being moderator was when Jason Holopoulos nominated him and referred to him in his nomination speech as a faithful blogger and podcaster, to which I immediately turned to a friend of mine and said, see, I told you it's a real thing. And so for anybody who's still listening to this, this is a real thing that's happening right now. Even people like Kevin DeYoung do it. So be encouraged, young men. This was really a good year for swag, and we talk about swag on the exhibitors hall floor, and there was some good swag in that regard. I saw a picture of an RUF Mint tin. I don't know if you actually grabbed one this year.
No,
or not.
I saw the MTW one, which was plastic, but there was a
the MTW one. Somebody sent me a picture of one in the middle of the week, so I don't know if that was one they had in their pocket or if they actually got it from RUF. But now I've got to go double check my sources. Maybe this is fake news. I apologize. But the MTW mints were handy to have. They were in the they weren't on the floor though. They were in our little bags.
I leaned over to somebody and asked them a question, and they answered my question and then handed me those mints. So I guess they were handy for that guy to give me a subtle hint.
I was trying to think through. Did you spot anything on the? I mean, I don't think we were on the exhibitors hall very much this year. It was all pretty busy.
I did
floor
very
business.
briefly to go talk to Wayne Sparkman, which was a delight. I very quickly picked up. There's a M&A coffee cup that I got, and I feel like I got the MTW mints, and that was probably about. Oh, the water bottle that was useful from Greenville. So.
Oh yeah, the Greenville water bottle. Now that's at their luncheon. The water bottle from Greenville was phenomenal. They gave out a coffee mug last year that's similar. That was really good. But trying to think, Bent Tree was giving out cigars this year. They did that a few years ago, and I know our Wojo Ken was giving out some cigars. I think for his podcast too. But I'm always a friend to a guy handing out a cigar. I do think, was it George Sayer? And we're going to reference George's summary YouTube kind of podcast thing on the GA down in our notes. But George referenced the pins that our friend Scott Edberg brought, the Polity Matter, lapel pin looking things, as the swag of the General Assembly.
That was how many times did you see somebody giving a speech and notice that they had a Polity Matters pin on? And that it was funny because I gave my first actual speech on the floor, and Scott immediately came over to me and handed me the pin and says, I think you're the only one that doesn't have this.
Yeah, I think I've said it to Scott, but those were a big surprise to me. I think I don't know if you knew about them beforehand or not, but those were great. Well, you guys if you're listening and you want to know, just go look around Twitter. You'll find it somewhere. I think Paul Cahill was posting some stuff about him the other day too, so you can find pictures of him if you need them. But a good year for swag. We're already trying to think through what we're going to do for next year for us, and I'm sure other folks are going to have cool stuff too. So, what else should we talk about? It was a smaller space than we were used to, I think, in the past. The assembly hall was small, and at one point, Kevin actually had to tell us, "Hey, if you're not a voting member, you need to move so that commissioners can get in place to be able to vote and have space to sit down," which I can't recall that happening. I can recall him separating us in the past, but actually telling people they might need to leave the room was unusual.
Well, we had, 2,300 commissioners, which was near a record for a space that we used in 2015, and we had space left over because I remember that was one of my early GAs. So we had been there before, but had not taken up that much space.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I guess in theory, we will not be able to return to Chattanooga again if we maintain our size and growth because I just wouldn't be able to handle it again.
Did you want to touch?
Well, what else? Is there anything else you want to mention?
The most awkward moment, the M&A,
yes, please do.
report.
Please do.
Of course, there was controversy swirling around Irwin Ince, and I think they were for different issues, so everybody had their own kind of issue of something that happened at M&A during the year. So whatever you think about that, I do think it was quite awkward to have a discussion about employment and salary on the floor. These are things that usually happen in the committee and in the COC. And so I felt a little bit like when you're a kid and your parents are fighting and you're like, please make it stop. So I thought that Kevin DeYoung actually handled it pretty well because there were some points in which people were concerned about, the decorum is you talk about issues, you don't talk about people, which is really hard when you're talking about the coordinator particularly. And I think he did a good job of letting people speak, but warning people, hey, keep it about issues, and then we'll get to the votes on some of these things. So in the end, what the committee and COC had recommended got passed, but yeah, so we survived it at least.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. The only thing I would say before we tell them about your special gift that you're going to give to us here in a minute is that, listeners, we ran into a ton of y'all last week, and it was just super encouraging. We have a lot of fun at GA with swag and, tweeting and being online and having a good time and talking about all this kind of stuff. But the most encouraging thing for me is to hear that what we have done with this podcast is produce resource that is helpful for y'all. And so the men that I've talked to last week that have used our podcast to study for licensure exams or ordination, or guys that have become clerks of their sessions and have found it useful to hear us talk through these matters, those kinds of stories are really encouraging to us. And just this work is really about the church, and so to hear that the church has been benefited, it really keeps us going. And I know that sounds super cheesy, and we don't always get super cheesy, but once in a while you just got to say it. So thank y'all for listening and for supporting and encouraging us when you see us. Jared, you spent some time with a friend of ours last week. Do you want to give an intro to this, or maybe you were going to say something else first, and I can edit all this around?
So if you're thinking of, we mentioned it earlier, the print resources for studying the BCO, you think of Ramsey, you think of Smith, now you're going to think of Almquist. But online, if you can find the PCA BCO historical project, it is rich with every chapter of the BCO and the history of it. So if it has an origin that is in the old PCUS BCO or not, or if it's completely new, and then how it's changed over the years as we've changed it, as it was changed in the old PCUS. So you can see the history of that chapter and what it originally was dealing with and why it changed. And then often there will be commentaries down below, whether it's Ramsey. I think he was working to get some of Smith on there. Something interesting Hodge said. Well, the guy who put this all together is the PCA archivist, who is our official archivist, not historian. He'll address that there. And he put together this resource, and we want to recommend the resource. I think we have before, but also you get to hear a little bit about what goes into it, why he was doing it. I will also mention the fact that I gave him a couple of our Polity Matters pins, and he said he was going to put it in the collection as a unique artifact. So we are in the history books, fellas.
All I picture is like a post-apocalyptic world, and somebody's wandering around, Lawrenceville, Georgia area, and they stumble upon a building, and in an enclosed glass case is this dusty blue Polity Matters pin that somebody quickly sweeps aside, to get the can of beans that's laying behind it, so they might survive. All right, sorry, nerded out too much. Well, we're going to play that interview. Where were you guys when you
we were on
talking to Wayne?
The exhibitors floor, so if you hear background noises or things like that, that's what that's from. So try to have a conversation there. It's not very long, maybe 20 minutes or so, but enjoy. let's just start off and introduce yourself.
Okay.
Who are you, and what do you do in the PCA?
Okay. My name is Wayne Sparkman. I am the director for the PCA Historical Center, which boils down to I am the archivist for the PCA, keeping track of and gathering and preserving and making accessible the records of the PCA and its predecessor denominations. That's the job of an archivist, is to gather what needs to be preserved, to care for it, make it, keep it in good condition, and then make it accessible. There's no point in having it if you don't make it accessible.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah. And I've heard you before say that you're not the historian of the PCA.
Correct.
What's the difference?
An archivist does what I just labeled, what I listed, whereas a historian takes what the archivist has put together, or someone else has put together, and writes about it. Basically digests all of that material to produce an article or a book or a talk or whatever. It's the other end of the digestive process, as it were.
Yeah.
I'm eating the stuff, but the historian is making use of it, putting it to good energy.
Yeah. So who is helped by the PCA archive? Is it people who are wanting to write histories, or people that are wanting to preserve things from their church, or how does that work?
Local church historians, denominational historians, biographers. You may be familiar with the biography that was done by Doug Duma on Gordon Clark, which remarkably was a book-length work that he wrote while a student at Sangre de Cristo Seminary. He graduates and had the book in publishable form at that point in time. A lot of different people will use an archives, not just for academic purposes, but sometimes it might be even things as mundane as we want to prove that in fact our ownership of this is valid, that we actually own this, and so we're looking for some property certificate. And of course then it becomes, did somebody bother to preserve it?
Yeah. And then you have some collections of some people's works, right?
Yes.
Who do you have in your collection?
I like to talk about the Historical Center dividing into 4 different groups or legs of the stool, where we have the organizational records for the PCA and its predecessor denominations.
So the RPCES?
The RPCES, which was itself a merger of 2 groups. So we pick up all of those record streams as part of our legitimate focus. We are the archive of record for those 4 denominations. And then we have manuscript collections for over 150 people connected with those denominations. Organizations produce records, people produce papers. A lot of archives will operate technically as preserving the records of organizations, and they don't mix the manuscript collection aspect of it. And then you will have archives that only collect the papers of people. We mix the two. And then third, we have the annual congregational histories of several hundred churches. So local churches can submit on an annual basis, or whenever for that matter, accounts of what the Lord is doing in that congregation. And if the day comes when they might publish an anniversary volume or something like that, we'd always like to get a copy of that if we can as well. The fourth leg of the stool.
Yeah, I think we sent you. We had our 200th anniversary,
yes.
so we sent you a mug and some of our materials.
And we greatly appreciated. The last leg of the stool is we've been trying to build a research library. Any aspect of Presbyterianism, generally with a focus on American Presbyterianism, but we do go over into Scotland and England and so forth with some of the materials that we have. But all of that library serves to provide the background, the backdrop to the collections that are our foremost emphasis.
Okay, and then, but do you have a few people's personal papers? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Oh yeah,
I've seen it on the website.
The personal papers of from the stated clerks, Morton Smith, Paul Gilchrist, and Roy Taylor.
Okay.
For their terms of service as stated clerk for the PCA. Gilchrist was also stated clerk for the RPCES for a good long time. His collection among the stated clerks, his is the largest accordingly. But other personal papers, Gordon Hudden Clark would be one. Paul Settle, one of the founding fathers of the PCA.
Yes.
G. Aiken Taylor would be yet another. Frank File, who was a missionary in India. The list just kind of keeps going. Oddly, we have the papers of Robert Dick Wilson, who was a professor at Princeton. And Princeton doesn't have them. Wilson mentored a fellow by the name of Alan McRae. And McRae was a founding member of the OPC, but within just a couple of years was one of those that pulled out, left the OPC to help form the Bible Presbyterian denomination.
Yeah.
But because of his having been mentored by Wilson, when Wilson died in the second year of existence of Westminster Seminary, McRae helped Wilson's widow to settle his estate, and so Wilson's papers were among McRae's papers when we received those.
Oh.
So that's how we came to have that material.
Yeah. How would pastors, churches help you in your work as an archivist?
How would they help us? Well,
you probably don't want every single bulletin they're doing, right? But...
yeah, no. We're really, because of lack of space, we would love to have, let's say, 12 select bulletins per year from a church. And if you had an ordination or some special service, that could be among those 12 that you might send us. But we really don't have room for every bulletin from every church by any means. But those things are helpful. But also, just to keep the historical center in mind, the Lord may put you in a place to be the person to encourage someone of importance in the history of the denomination to donate their papers, whomever that might be. We might talk about any number of different men who we would all recognize as being among the leaders in the PCA, and yet I can't get around to all of them to encourage them to think about donating their papers, nor in every case am I the one that would encourage them to take that action, because it's not necessarily something that somebody wants to do. They see it as a lot of work. The work aspect of it is really our job.
Yeah.
They don't have to have it in finished form when they send it to us.
Yeah. Yeah. What about the? You need to take a break.
He's fine.
Okay. What about the PCA BCO history project? That website.
Okay.
Can you just tell us how that got started?
Yeah. My wife. It was a project I'd had in mind for a while, and my wife came down with some problem and was hospitalized for about a month, and then about a 5-month recuperation at home, bed rest and so forth. And so it made it a good time to try to work from home, and to work on that project was something that I could do and begin to build it where you've got a separate web page for every paragraph in the BCO, and tracking where that paragraph, as it stands today, where it came from. Surprisingly, most of our BCO to this day has its anchor in the old Southern Presbyterian BCO in 1879.
Yeah.
So from 1879 to 2025, we're standing on all of that history, and sometimes with some of the places, some of the paragraphs, they even were pulling things out of the old Westminster directories, and even before that in a few cases.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons Ramsey's still relevant, who wrote a commentary on the 1800s
Exactly.
BCO. And so on some of those web pages, having gone through some of them, you would have the text as old as you can get back, and then any revisions as it came up to modern day. Then usually you'll have some commentaries if there's...
There was a commentary done in the old Southern Presbyterian Church by a fellow in the late 19th century, and we include that. We've been given clearance from Greenville Seminary to add Morton Smith's commentary. Mm-hmm. Admittedly, we haven't gotten around to that for the most part. I think I did a little bit of that work, but need to get back to that. And then I also add, for interest, some cross-references to the OPC and the ARP, and the RPCES, where they're relevant. Not everything is.
Yeah, and I've seen some selections of Hodge or somebody else if they've had some comments on it.
And that takes a lot of work, finding those things and adding them again where relevant.
Yeah. Well, have you thought through or heard any feedback about how people have used that website?
Larry Haupt is probably one of my bigger advocates and fans, if you will, of having found the whole thing useful and frequently turning to it.
Yeah, I can just say I've found it useful. We've used it on our show in researching things. So every chapter that we go through, and then there have been times where I've thought, I wonder about writing a BCO amendment, and that's so helpful because you can see where it's been before and sometimes you include on there either CCB questions on it or attempts to change it. And that seems really helpful. It was helpful with some of the history behind.
Well, the original idea behind it all was that a lot of the younger guys basically didn't know but what it was written kind of out of thin air in 73.
Yeah.
And didn't realize that it really was rooted back a century and more before that. So that was what motivated getting that all done. And I also at the same time had the hope that maybe it would help in terms of writing any new changes, that you could perfect it better by being able to see where it's been and how you might change it. And the real dream is for somebody to come along someday and say, well, it really was written better back then. Let's go back to that one.
Yeah. I found it helpful when we were discussing changing, I think it's 33.1 and 34.1, and had some of the history of why the extra section is in there for the PCA, of the whole history of Union Seminary, and they couldn't get into a presbytery in terms of that whole history. So that was helpful to see why is that even in there, and what were they trying to do on that. So yeah, what's the future of the project?
What's the future? Well, I need to get just simply back to work on the project. It needs some weekly some weekly portion of my time, whether it's every Friday or whatever. But I have an Excel file where I have all of the overtures from 73 to current, and can search that and pull together all of the overtures pertinent to a given BCO passage. And so to then grab all of those and make reference to them on that page for that paragraph, so that you could then, in shorthand, say, okay, in those years, they tried to make changes. In some cases they succeeded, in some cases they were overturned. And you can go back and look at the ones that failed and know how to succeed next time, or simply know when it had been changed previously. And so that's kind of one thing that's in the offing.
Yeah, I had one person that really wanted me to ask you the question, any plans on our RAO history website?
Another equal amount of work, admittedly, and I've thought about it, but I just haven't started on it.
All right. Well, I'll volunteer Josh Torrey to be your assistant, because he wants that. So if you could do that. So anyway, anybody can help you with that, if they were listening to this.
Yeah, that would be something that we could talk about with somebody that would seriously interested.
Yeah. So just contact Wayne Sparkman at the PCA Archive.
The advantage that I have in terms of on-site in the office on the different changes through the years is I have over 50 different editions of the old Southern Presbyterian BCO. They would produce a new hardback book every year.
Wow.
And I have all but one or two.
Had they not invented the 3-ring binder yet? Is that what they're...
No, the 3-ring bindery was our invention, and as was the commissioner's handbag.
Yeah.
And the fellow that brought that into the PCA, Ross Cook, other businesses and things were using handbags for people, and he was the one that imported it as an idea for how to package things for the commissioners. And when Ross Cook died, he was cremated. His remains were lowered into the grave in a commissioner's handbag.
There's your trivia for the day. Well, thank you. Anything else that you wanted to say about it, or?
Pray. There's still so much to do on that. I really kind of gave out at one point, and the directory for worship still needs a lot of work. And in the Southern Presbyterian Church, the directory for worship was something they didn't get to until 20 years after approving the original BCO for them. That was in 1879, and it was 1894, I think.
So it's not without precedent how we've gone 50 years without doing it.
Yeah, and so they went that long time.
Yeah.
Within about 4 years after their first edition, they did do an index. And I think they did a loose leaf version. I've got a sample of it, but that was in the 20th century at least, maybe in the 1950s, roughly. But they only did it once. They learned their lesson quickly. Never did it again.
Yeah, I have a old PCUS PCO, and it has updates because I bought it in a used bookstore, and it has some of the updates in the back. So you can go to the back and see. And I think it's a 33 and what they did in 34 and 35 and 36. So they tried to update it, but yeah, not as easy to do. All right. Well, hey, thank you for your time and talking about it.
Most welcome.
Maybe this will get you some help or some good finds from this. So
Scott or somebody else.
yeah, get you some help on this.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.